Welcome to the Cozy Storytime, a peaceful place to unwind and relax. Before we begin, be sure to subscribe and like the video to get more soothing stories every night. So, where are you watching this from, and what are you doing right now? I hope you enjoyed this story. Now, take a deep breath, make yourself comfortable, and let's fall asleep peacefully together. This time I will tell you about a Norse mythology story entitled First Day at Hogwarts. Beyond the ancient stone walls of Hogwarts, beneath a starry midnight sky, a story begins. Imagine yourself walking through grand corridors, illuminated by the warm glow of candlelight. Your footsteps echo softly against the stone floor, while shadows dance along the walls as if whispering secrets of the past. The first day at this school of magic was meant to be filled with wonder and learning, but sometimes magic has a way of testing us. Sometimes it calls from the darkness, leading us towards something greater, something we do not yet understand. Tonight, let this story unfold gently, easing your mind, carrying your imagination into a world of enchantment. Take a deep breath and listen, because every journey begins with a single step, and tonight, we take that step together. The steam from the grand, scarlet-colored train curled into the crisp morning air as I stood on platform 9 3/4, gripping the handle of my trunk tightly. The bustling station was filled with excited chatter, laughter, and the occasional hoot of an owl from one of the many cages students carried. I could hardly believe I was here. For years, I had dreamt of this moment, of stepping onto the Hogwarts Express, of leaving behind the ordinary world, and of entering the realm of magic that had always felt just out of reach. I inhaled deeply, taking in the scent of coal and metal from the train, mingled with the comforting aroma of pastries and sweets from a nearby trolley. My heart pounded in my chest, but it wasn't fear, it was excitement, nervous anticipation that tingled at my fingertips. "Come on, hurry up," someone called, and I turned to see a group of older students in their school robes waving at their friends before hopping onto the train. The sight made my chest tighten. In just a few minutes, I would be doing the same, stepping into a new world where I would learn real magic. With a final deep breath, I took my first step forward. The train steps felt solid beneath my feet, the cool metal contrasting with the warmth that had settled in my chest. Inside, the Hogwarts Express was just as I had imagined, long corridors lined with compartments, some open and welcoming, others shut tight. The air buzzed with energy, the sound of laughter and conversation creating a steady hum of life. I began making my way down the corridor, peeking into compartments, searching for a place to sit. Some were already full of students chatting animatedly, catching up after a long summer. Others held smaller groups, some staring out the window, lost in thought. A few glanced up as I passed, offering polite smiles or curious looks. At last, I found an empty compartment near the middle of the train. I slid the door open, heaved my trunk into the overhead storage, and let out a small sigh of relief as I sank into the seat by the window. The red cushions were plush, soft beneath me, and the window offered a perfect view of the platform where families waved goodbye. Just as I was beginning to relax, the compartment door slid open again. "Mind if I sit here?" a voice asked. I looked up to see a boy about my age standing in the doorway, his robes slightly wrinkled as though he had put them on in a hurry. He had a friendly expression, his brown eyes bright with curiosity. "Not at all," I said, motioning to the seat across from me. He grinned and stepped inside, hauling his trunk in before collapsing into the seat with a contented sigh. "Thanks." Everywhere else is either full or taken by older students who look like they might turn me into a toad if I sit down uninvited. I laughed, feeling some of my nervousness ebb away. I know what you mean. It's a bit overwhelming, isn't it? He nodded, stretching his legs out. I'm Felix, by the way. I introduced myself in return, and we quickly fell into easy conversation. We talked about where we were from, what we were most excited about at Hogwarts, and which subjects we were looking forward to the most. I admitted I was nervous about potions. I had read that it required precise measurements and delicate handling, and I had a habit of being a little too enthusiastic when experimenting with things. Felix smirked. So, basically, stay on the opposite side of the room from you during class? I rolled my eyes playfully. Hey, I haven't blown anything up yet. The train gave a sudden lurch, and the platform outside began to slide away. The chattering outside grew muffled as the train picked up speed, and soon we were gliding past the city and into the rolling countryside. The golden fields stretched endlessly under the soft light of the morning sun, a stark contrast to the busy platform we had just left behind. The realization hit me then. I was really leaving my old life behind. I wasn't just heading to a school, I was heading to a world that had only ever existed in stories before today. The thought sent another wave of excitement through me, tinged with the smallest trace of nervousness. Before long, the trolley witch arrived, her cart stacked high with all sorts of sweets. My eyes widened at the colorful packages and strange treats I had only heard about. Chocolate frogs, pumpkin pasties, Birdie Bot's every flavor beans, cauldron cakes, there were so many choices. Felix and I pooled our money together, buying a little bit of everything. I unwrapped a chocolate frog first, watching in fascination as the enchanted confection twitched before leaping straight out of my hand. With a yelp, I scrambled after it, nearly knocking over Felix's pumpkin pasty in the process. Nice reflexes, Felix chuckled as I finally managed to trap the frog against the seat. I quickly popped it into my mouth before it could escape again, savoring the rich, velvety chocolate. We each tried Birdie Bot's every flavor beans next, challenging each other to eat them without looking. My first bean was a delightful strawberry, but my second, Merlin helped me, was something that tasted suspiciously like old socks. Felix burst into laughter at my expression, but his laughter was cut short when he got one that tasted like fish. We spent the next few minutes gagging dramatically, each trying to one-up the other with the worst flavor. The journey continued, filled with stories, laughter, and the occasional glimpse out the window at the changing scenery. As the sun began to lower, casting golden hues over the landscape, the countryside transformed. Rolling hills gave way to darker forests, the sky painted in shades of deep purple and fiery orange. Felix and I eventually quieted, the initial excitement fading into a peaceful calm. The train's rhythmic hum, the gentle sway of the carriage, and the warmth of the setting sun made it easy to relax. I let my head rest against the window, watching as distant lights flickered to life in small villages along the way. Then, in the distance, I saw it. Hogwarts. The castle stood tall against the twilight sky, its countless towers reaching upward, windows glowing like fireflies in the dark. It was more magnificent than I had ever imagined, a place pulled straight from a dream. For a long moment, I simply stared, hardly daring to blink. Felix must have seen it too, because he whispered, "Wow!" I couldn't find words to respond. As the train slowed, a voice echoed through the carriage, We will be arriving at Hogwarts shortly. Please leave your belongings on the train. They will be taken to your dormitories separately." My heart pounded as students began bustling about, adjusting their robes and gathering their last-minute things. Excitement buzzed through the air again, but this time it felt different. More real. The train pulled to a gentle stop, and outside, I could see the shadowy outline of a tall, bearded man holding a lantern high. Felix turned to me, grinning. "Ready?" I took a deep breath, my fingers curling around the edge of my seat before I stood. Ready. And with that, we stepped off the train into the magic that awaited. Stepping off the Hogwarts Express felt like crossing an invisible threshold between the world I had known and the one I was about to call home. The crisp night air was filled with murmurs of excitement as students, both new and old, filed onto the dimly lit platform. My breath came out in a small puff, the coolness of the evening brushing against my skin as I adjusted my robes. The golden glow from the train windows illuminated the crowd, but beyond that, the landscape was shrouded in mystery. A deep, booming voice broke through the chatter. First years over here." I turned towards the voice and felt my breath catch. There, towering over the gathered students, stood a giant of a man, his bushy beard illuminated by the lantern he held aloft. His presence was warm and welcoming despite his imposing size, and there was a kind twinkle in his eyes as he surveyed the crowd of nervous first years. "Come along now, don't be shy," he called again, beckoning us towards him. Felix and I exchanged a glance before following the other first years toward the giant man. I couldn't help but stare up at him in awe as we drew closer. "Name's Hagrid," he said cheerfully, nodding at us. "Keeper of keys and grounds at Hogwarts." "Right, everyone here?" "Good. Follow me, mind your step." With that, Hagrid turned and began leading us away from the platform. The older students, who were making their way towards a separate path, disappeared into the shadows, leaving only the nervous chatter of the first years echoing through the night. We followed Hagrid down a winding path, the sound of our footsteps muffled by the damp earth beneath us. The further we walked, the darker it became. Trees loomed on either side of the path, their branches casting long, twisting shadows that danced in the lantern light. A hush fell over the group, our earlier excitement tempered by the eerie beauty of the unfamiliar surroundings. Then, suddenly, the trees parted. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. There, across a vast, inky black lake, stood Hogwarts Castle. The sight of it sent shivers down my spine, not from fear, but from sheer wonder. The castle was enormous, its countless turrets and towers reaching toward the star-speckled sky. Golden light poured from its windows, reflecting off the still waters of the lake and casting a shimmering glow across the surface. "No way," Felix breathed beside me. I could only nod, unable to tear my eyes away. "Right then," Hagrid said, his voice filled with amusement at our reactions. "Boats this way, no more than 4 to a boat." I looked down and saw several small boats bobbing gently along the shore, their wooden hulls barely making a sound as they rocked with the movement of the water. Felix and I quickly climbed into one, joined by a quiet-looking girl with dark hair and a boy who seemed just as awestruck as the rest of us. Hagrid waited until we were all seated before giving a nod. "Off we go." As if by magic, because it most certainly was, the boats began to glide forward, cutting smoothly through the dark water without the need for oars. The lake was eerily silent, save for the occasional ripple and the distant hoot of an owl. I leaned slightly over the edge, watching as the reflection of the castle wavered with each gentle movement. It felt surreal, like I had stepped into a dream. The castle loomed larger and larger as we approached, its high stone walls almost glowing under the moonlight. I could make out the massive entrance doors now, and the shadowy figures of professors waiting just beyond them. The excitement in my chest bubbled up again, making my fingers tingle. Before I had time to fully process it, our boats reached the shore. Hagrid stepped onto the dock first, holding out his lantern. "Everyone now, careful, don't want to be fouling it on your first night." We clambered onto dry land, still craning our necks to take in every detail of the towering castle before us. Hagrid led us up a set of stone steps, each one worn smooth from centuries of footsteps. The sheer weight of history in this place was overwhelming. Every brick, every window seemed to hum with stories of the past. The giant entrance doors creaked open before we even reached them, as if the castle itself was welcoming us. A tall, stern-looking witch with sharp eyes and neatly pinned hair stood waiting. She wore deep emerald robes, and though her expression was serious, there was something undeniably regal about her presence. "Professor McGonagall," someone whispered beside me. She surveyed the group with a keen gaze before speaking, her voice crisp and authoritative. "Welcome to Hogwarts." A hush fell over us as she continued. "In just a few moments, you will enter the Great Hall, where you will be sorted into your houses. The house you are placed in will be like your family while you are here. Your successes will earn points for your house, and any rule breaking will cost points. At the end of the year, the house with the most points will win the house cup." I swallowed hard, the weight of the moment settling over me. I had read about the 4 houses, Gryffindor, Hufflepuff, Ravenclaw, and Slytherin, but the idea of actually standing in front of the entire school, waiting to be sorted, suddenly made my stomach twist with nerves. Professor McGonagall's sharp eyes seemed to assess our anxieties. "The sorting ceremony is nothing to fear," she said briskly. "Now, follow me." The doors swung open wider, and the moment we stepped inside, my breath caught in my throat. The Great Hall was unlike anything I had ever seen. Rows upon rows of long wooden tables stretched across the vast space, each lined with students dressed in their respective house colors. Candles floated in midair, casting a soft, golden glow over everything. Above us, the ceiling seemed to vanish entirely, revealing a sky filled with twinkling stars, a perfect mirror of the night outside. A hush fell over the room as we entered. Hundreds of eyes turned to watch as we walked down the center aisle, towards the raised platform where the professors sat. At the very center of the platform was an old, worn-out hat resting on a stool, the sorting hat. I could barely hear the whispers of my fellow first-years as we came to a halt, our eyes locked on the hat. My heart pounded so loudly that I was sure the entire hall could hear it. One by one, names were called, and students stepped forward to sit on the stool. The sorting hat was placed on their heads, and after a few seconds, sometimes longer, it would announce their house. Cheers erupted from the respective tables each time. With every name called, my anxiety grew. What if the hat didn't know where to put me? What if I wasn't meant to be here at all? And then, my name was called. A lump formed in my throat as I stepped forward, my legs slightly unsteady. I sat on the stool, feeling the weight of the hat as it was placed over my head. The brim slipped past my eyes, plunging me into darkness. Then, a voice, smooth, ancient, and amused, whispered in my ear. Well, what do we have here? The moment the sorting hat was placed on my head, everything else faded away. The hushed whispers of the great hall, the flickering candlelight, the hundreds of eyes watching, all of it melted into the background. I was plunged into a strange, quiet space where only the voice of the hat existed, curling through my mind like a wisp of smoke. Well, what do we have here? The voice murmured, sounding both ancient and amused. I swallowed hard, my hands clenching the sides of the stool. I don't know, I thought, feeling ridiculous for even trying to respond. The hat chuckled, a rich, knowing sound. Oh, but I do. I see everything. Your mind is an open book to me. That was a slightly terrifying thought, but before I could dwell on it, the hat continued, its voice curling through my thoughts like a cat winding around one's legs. Curious. Yes, very curious indeed. You have a thirst for knowledge, that much is certain. A sharp mind eager to prove itself. Ravenclaw. The thought crossed my mind instantly. The house of intelligence, of wisdom. I had read about the great witches and wizards that had come from there, thinkers, scholars, innovators. It made sense, didn't it? The sorting hat mused, as if it had heard my thoughts, which it probably had. Yes, you would do well in Ravenclaw. But I sensed something else. I held my breath. There is courage here, the hat continued. Not the loud, reckless sort, but the quiet kind. The bravery that rises in uncertainty. A Gryffindor's heart beats within you, though you don't see it yet. Gryffindor. The words sent a ripple of nerves through me. Brave? Was I? Gryffindors were daring, fearless, ready to charge into danger without hesitation. I didn't feel like that at all. I was nervous, uncertain, full of self-doubt. Surely, the hat had mistaken me for someone else. Oh, I never make mistakes, the hat said, its voice laced with amusement. I froze. You can really hear everything I think? The hat chuckled. Naturally. I groaned internally. Great. Now, the hat said, almost kindly. You doubt yourself, but I see further than you do. You have potential, my dear student. But the question remains, where will you flourish best? I hesitated. The truth was, I didn't know. Ravenclaw? The idea of endless knowledge, of surrounding myself with books, of discovering the wonders of magic through study, it was appealing. Gryffindor? The house of the brave. A house that valued heart, determination, and standing up for what was right. Not an easy choice, is it? The hat murmured. No, I admitted. But what if I choose wrong? The sorting hat laughed, the sound warm and knowing. Oh, my dear child, there is no wrong choice. There is only the path you decide to walk. I merely guide you to the place where you will become your best self. I swallowed. And where is that? The hat hummed. You could do well in Ravenclaw, but I see something greater in you. Something waiting to awaken. A pause. It better be. Gryffindor. The word rang through the great hall as the hat's voice faded from my mind. The moment the sorting hat was lifted from my head, sound came rushing back in, the cheers, the claps, the excited voices of my new housemates welcoming me. Dazed, I slid off the stool and made my way toward the Gryffindor table. The red and gold banners seemed to shine brighter, the faces around me full of excitement and energy. Someone clapped me on the back as I sat down, and I barely managed to return their grin. My heart was still racing, my mind spinning with everything that had just happened. Felix caught my eye from across the room, still waiting for his turn. He shot me a wide-eyed look, mouthing, "Gryffindor," in disbelief. I could only nod, still feeling like I had just been thrown headfirst into a world I wasn't sure I belonged in. The sorting continued, name after name being called, the hat deciding fates in mere moments. Felix was eventually called up, and I watched as the hat was placed on his head. It seemed to take its time with him, its brim twitching slightly as it deliberated. Then, at last, Ravenclaw. Felix grinned, looking relieved as he made his way over to the Ravenclaw table, where a group of students welcomed him with cheers. He shot me a playful thumbs up before disappearing into the crowd. One by one, the last students were sorted, and finally, the ceremony was over. Professor McGonagall removed the sorting hat and the stool, and as she stepped aside, an elderly man with half-moon spectacles and a long silver beard rose from the center of the professor's table. Professor Dumbledore. The moment he stood, the entire hall fell silent. He surveyed us with twinkling blue eyes before spreading his arms wide in welcome. To our new students, welcome. To our returning students, welcome back. I have no doubt that this year will be filled with wonders, challenges, and, of course, a great deal of learning. A murmur of excitement rippled through the students. But before we embark on the adventure of another school year, let us feast. With a clap of his hands, the long tables before us were suddenly filled with food. Plates piled high with roasted meats, steaming vegetables, golden brown loaves of bread, and goblets brimming with pumpkin juice appeared before our very eyes. The sight and smell made my stomach growl. Laughter and conversation filled the hall as everyone eagerly dug in. The food was incredible, each bite bursting with rich flavors, every dish more delicious than the last. I listened as the older Gryffindors shared stories of past years, their tales filled with daring exploits, mischievous pranks, and the occasional narrow escape from trouble. Despite my lingering nerves, I couldn't help but smile. This warmth, this energy, this feeling of belonging was something I had never experienced before. By the time the feast ended, my exhaustion had started to settle in. Dumbledore made a few final announcements, rules about the Forbidden Forest, warnings about enchanted corridors, and a light-hearted reminder that mischief, while inevitable, should be kept to a respectable minimum. And then, at last, now, off to bed with you all. Tomorrow, a new year begins. The great hall erupted into movement as prefects began guiding students toward their dormitories. I followed the other Gryffindors up the grand staircases, my legs growing heavier with each step. We finally reached the portrait of the fat lady, who looked at us expectantly. "Password?" she asked. A prefect answered, and the portrait swung open, revealing the Gryffindor common room. Warm golden light flickered from the fireplace, casting a cozy glow over the plush armchairs and deep red tapestries. The room was filled with a comforting hum of conversation as students trickled in, stretching and yawning after the long day. Our dormitory was just up the stairs, and as soon as I reached my bed, I collapsed onto it with a contented sigh. The blankets were warm, the pillows soft, and for the first time since arriving, I allowed myself to relax completely. As I lay there, staring up at the canopy above me, a single thought settled in my mind. This was real. I was really here. At Hogwarts. And tomorrow, the real adventure would begin. The first morning at Hogwarts felt unreal. When I opened my eyes, it took me a few seconds to remember where I was. The deep red canopy above my bed, the soft murmur of students stirring in their dorms, and the distant echo of footsteps in the corridors, it all came rushing back in an instant. I was at Hogwarts. A thrill shot through me as I sat up, rubbing the sleep from my eyes. The other boys in my dormitory were beginning to wake as well, yawning and stretching. Trunks creaked open, and robes rustled as we all got ready for the day. Morning, one of my roommates, a lanky boy named Nathan, greeted me with a sleepy grin. Morning, I replied, still feeling dazed with excitement. The anticipation built as we made our way down to the common room. The Gryffindor common room was even more beautiful in the morning light, warm and cozy, with the fire still crackling softly in the hearth. A few students were already gathered, chatting excitedly about their schedules for the day. Ready for our first day? Felix's voice cut through my thoughts as he appeared at the entrance to the common room. Barely, I admitted with a nervous chuckle. I can't believe this is really happening. Felix smirked. Well, believe it. We're about to learn actual magic. That thought alone sent a fresh wave of excitement through me. We followed the other students down to the Great Hall for breakfast, where the enchanted ceiling reflected a brilliant morning sky. Golden sunlight streamed through the tall windows, illuminating the endless array of food spread across the tables. I barely had time to grab a piece of toast before a flurry of parchment fluttered down onto the tables, our schedules for the day. I snatched mine up eagerly, scanning the list of classes. Charms, transfiguration, potions. The names alone sent a thrill through me. Real magic. Real lessons. I can't wait for charms, Felix said, looking over my shoulder. We actually get to use wands today. I grinned. It's about time. With breakfast finished, we made our way to our first class of the day, Charms with Professor Flitwick. The corridors of Hogwarts were a maze, filled with twisting staircases, moving portraits, and students bustling in every direction. The walls seemed alive with magic, the very air buzzing with energy. After a few wrong turns and nearly getting stuck on a staircase that decided to move mid-step, we finally arrived at the Charms classroom. Professor Flitwick, a tiny man with a kind face, stood atop a stack of books so he could see over his desk. "Oh, welcome, welcome," he squeaked excitedly as we all filed in. "Today, we shall begin with the basics of wand movement and pronunciation, essential for any proper spell casting." I sat at my desk, practically buzzing with excitement. Finally, it was time to cast magic. We started with a simple spell, Lumos, the charm that produced light from the tip of a wand. Professor Flitwick demonstrated, his wand glowing brilliantly. A simple flick of the wrist, a clear incantation, and voila! I took a deep breath and gripped my wand. This was it. My first real spell. "Lumos," I said, flicking my wand just as instructed. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a bright, blinding flash erupted from my wand tip, far stronger than it should have been. A burst of light exploded across the room, sending a few students yelping and shielding their eyes. The light was gone in an instant, leaving the classroom in stunned silence. I stared at my wand, horrified. Professor Flitwick blinked rapidly, his hair slightly singed. Then, to my relief, he chuckled. "Ah, enthusiastic magic. No need to worry, my dear boy." That was quite the impressive burst. With practice, you learn to control it. I flushed with embarrassment, but a small part of me swelled with pride. At least I had made something happen. The rest of the lesson went more smoothly, though I was extra careful with my spells. My magic, it seemed, was a bit unstable. After charms, we moved on to transfiguration with Professor McGonagall. She was strict but brilliant, turning a desk into a cat with a mere flick of her wand. We were tasked with transforming matchsticks into needles. Felix managed to turn his silver in color, while mine remained stubbornly wooden, except for a small twitch that made it vibrate ominously on my desk. Transfiguration is precise magic, Professor McGonagall reminded us sternly. It requires focus, control, and discipline. Rushing will only lead to unstable results. I swallowed. That was exactly what I had been struggling with. Then came potions with Professor Snape. The dungeon classroom was cold, dimly lit by flickering torches. Shelves lined with mysterious ingredients loomed over us as Professor Snape swept into the room, his black robes billowing. "There will be no foolish one waving in this class," he intoned smoothly, his dark eyes scanning the room. "You are here to learn the subtle science and exact art of potion making." His voice was soft yet commanding, and I could feel every student sitting up straighter. Our first task was to brew a simple cure for boils. I followed the instructions carefully, measuring ingredients with exact precision. Felix and I worked side by side, sneaking glances at each other's cauldrons. For the most part, things were going well. My potion was turning the right shade of green, just as the instructions described. But when I went to stir it, a small explosion erupted from my cauldron. Thick, green smoke billowed into the air, filling the room with the acrid scent of burnt herbs. A few students coughed, waving the smoke away as my cauldron sizzled ominously. Snape appeared beside me in an instant, his dark eyes narrowing. "An interesting interpretation of the instructions," he said coolly. "Tell me, did you intend to create a smokescreen draft instead of a cure for boils?" I gulped. "No, sir." Snape's expression remained unreadable. Then, with a swish of his wand, the smoke dissipated instantly. "Perhaps next time you will focus more on accuracy rather than theatrics," he said. 10 points from Gryffindor. I sank in my seat as the Gryffindors groaned. My first day, and I had already lost points. By the time class ended, I felt thoroughly exhausted. My magic was unpredictable, and I had embarrassed myself in every lesson. I couldn't help but wonder, was I really cut out for this? As we made our way back to the common room, Felix nudged me. "Cheer up. At least you didn't set anything on fire." I groaned. "Yet." He chuckled. "Look, it's our first day. We're all figuring things out. You'll get the hang of it." I wasn't sure, but as we stepped into the warm glow of the common room, I felt a little better. Despite the mishaps, despite the chaos, I was finally learning magic. And that, at least, was something. The warm glow of the Gryffindor common room did little to soothe my nerves that evening. I had barely survived my first day of classes, and my magic had already proven itself to be wildly unpredictable. From nearly blinding my classmates in charms to making my cauldron explode in potions, I had managed to make quite the first impression, and not in a good way. Felix and I found an empty spot near the fireplace, sinking into the plush armchairs. The common room was lively, filled with students chatting about their day, laughing, and recounting their first lessons. I wanted to relax and enjoy the cozy atmosphere, but my mind kept replaying my earlier failures. "All right," Felix said, stretching his legs out in front of him. "First day, scale of 1 to disaster?" I groaned. Somewhere between mild catastrophe and the professor's regret letting me in. Felix smirked. "Oh, come on. You weren't that bad." I shot him a look. "Okay, maybe a little bad," he admitted. "But still, it's not the worst start. You actually made stuff happen. That's better than some students." "Making stuff happen isn't the problem," I muttered. "It's making it happen correctly that I seem to struggle with." Felix tilted his head. "Maybe your wand's the issue." I frowned, pulling my wand out of my robe pocket. It was a beautiful piece of craftsmanship, slender, made of dark walnut wood, with a faint silver sheen under the right light. According to Ollivander, it had a dragon heartstring core and was said to be powerful, but unpredictable. I was beginning to think unpredictable was an understatement. Felix leaned forward, inspecting it curiously. Dragon heartstring wands are known for being strong, but they can be a little temperamental. "Tell me about it," I muttered, turning the wand over in my hands. "What's yours made of?" "Phoenix feather," he said proudly, pulling out his wand. It was lighter in color, with a smooth and elegant curve to it. Ollivander said it would be picky about its owner, but great for complex magic. I sighed, looking back at my own wand. I wonder if mine even likes me. Felix laughed. "Well, there's only one way to find out. You need to practice." I hesitated. "What, here? In the middle of the common room? With my luck, I'll set someone's robes on fire." "Then let's go somewhere less flammable," Felix suggested. "Come on." Curious but wary, I followed him as he led me out of the common room. The castle was quieter now, most students either in their dorms or still in the common rooms. The warm candlelight flickered against the stone walls, casting long shadows as we made our way through the corridors. "Where are we going?" I asked. Felix grinned. "The unused classroom McGonagall mentioned earlier. I overheard some older students saying it's a great place to practice spells when you don't want a professor breathing down your neck." That sounded promising. And risky. But I was desperate. We finally reached the classroom, a dusty old room filled with worn wooden desks and forgotten bookshelves. The air smelled of parchment and old wood, and moonlight filtered through the tall, arched windows, casting a silvery glow across the room. Felix pulled out his wand. "All right, let's start with something small this time. No fireworks." I exhaled, gripping my wand tightly. "Okay. Small." We decided to try Lumos again. Felix demonstrated first, his one tip glowing with a soft, steady light. See? Just lumos, then a small flick. Nothing more. I nodded, taking a deep breath. Lumos. I flicked my wand, concentrating on keeping the magic controlled. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a light flared at the tip of my wand. Not an explosion this time, just a bright, steady glow. I let out a breath of relief. It worked. Felix grinned. See? You're getting it. Encouraged, I tried another spell, Wingardium Leviosa, the levitation charm we had learned about in theory earlier. I'd focused on a small stack of parchment on one of the desks, carefully pronouncing the incantation. Wingardium Leviosa. The parchment shuddered, then suddenly shot straight up into the air, slamming into the ceiling with a loud thud before fluttering back down like oversized confetti. Felix burst out laughing. Well, you got the Leviosa part right. I groaned. I have no control over this thing. He shook his head. You just need to find the right balance. Your wand is powerful, it just needs time to adjust to you. That made sense, but it didn't make me feel any less frustrated. We practiced for a while longer, my magic still erratic but slightly more manageable. The night grew later, and we eventually decided to head back before we got caught wandering the halls. As we made our way back toward Gryffindor Tower, I couldn't shake the feeling that my magic had a mind of its own. I wasn't just bad at controlling it, it felt like my wand was resisting me in some way. Did wands really do that? Felix nudged me. You okay? Yeah, I said slowly. Just thinking. What if my magic isn't the problem? What if my wand doesn't trust me yet? Felix blinked. That's an interesting thought. I mean, Ollivander said the wand chooses the wizard, right? What if it's still deciding? Felix considered that. Maybe you just need to prove yourself to it. How do I do that? He shrugged. Guess you'll have to figure that out. I sighed, pocketing my wand as we reached the portrait of the fat lady. The common room was quieter now, most students having already gone to bed. As I lay in my four-poster bed that night, staring up at the canopy, my thoughts kept circling back to my magic. I was at Hogwarts. I was learning magic. But something about my wand felt off, like it was waiting for something. And until I figured out what that was, I had a feeling my spells were going to keep surprising me. The dormitory was quiet, save for the gentle rustling of blankets and the soft breathing of my roommates. The warmth of my bed and the exhaustion from the long day should have lulled me to sleep, but my mind refused to rest. My thoughts kept returning to my wand, to the way it seemed to have a will of its own. What if Felix was right? What if I had to prove myself to my wand? I sighed, shifting under my blankets. It wasn't like I could just ask the wand what it wanted. A cool breeze slipped through a crack in the window, making me shiver. The castle at night felt different, quieter, almost like it was listening. The distant hoot of an owl echoed from the Ollery, and somewhere deep in the corridors, a suit of armor creaked as it settled into place. I turned over, trying to clear my thoughts. And then, a sharp tug in my hand. My eyes snapped open. My wand was still clutched in my fingers, but it was warm. Not like before, not like when I cast a spell. It was a different kind of warmth, almost like it was calling to me. A strange energy prickled at my fingertips. My heart began to race. I had no idea what my wand wanted, but it was practically buzzing now. I swallowed, hesitating. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe it was just my nerves, my own anxiety about not being able to control my magic. But then, the tip of my wand sparked. A faint blue glow shimmered at its end, barely visible in the darkness of the dormitory. I stared at it, my pulse quickening. That wasn't a spell. I hadn't even said anything. I sat up slowly, careful not to wake my roommates. The room was bathed in the soft glow of the moon, shadows stretching across the wooden floor. Something was happening, and whatever it was, my wand wanted me to follow. A sudden rush of curiosity overtook my fear. I had to know what was going on. Carefully, I swung my legs over the bed and stood. The floor was cold beneath my feet, sending a shiver up my spine. I grabbed my robe and slipped on my shoes, gripping my wand tightly as I tiptoed across the room. Felix stirred in his sleep, mumbling something about chocolate frogs before rolling over. I let out a breath. No turning back now. Moving as silently as possible, I pushed open the dormitory door and slipped into the darkened corridors of Hogwarts. The castle at night was an entirely different world. During the day, the halls were alive, filled with chatter, laughter, and the rush of students moving between classes. But at night, Hogwarts felt like something out of a dream. The walls seemed taller, the shadows darker. The candle sconces burned lower, their flames flickering against the stone. The portraits that were usually loud and chatty during the day were now snoring gently, some shifting in their frames as they slept. I moved carefully, my heart pounding in my chest. I wasn't technically breaking any rules. I wasn't sneaking out for fun. But I had a feeling Filch, the castle caretaker, wouldn't care about that distinction if he caught me wandering the halls past curfew. I glanced down at my wand. The blue glow was still faintly shimmering at the tip, pulsing softly like a heartbeat. It was leading me somewhere. But where? And more importantly, why? I followed the glow down the corridor, my footsteps soft against the stone. The castle was eerily silent, save for the occasional creak of the old wooden beams overhead. Then, a noise. A soft scraping sound, like metal against stone. I froze. The sound had come from around the next corner. My grip on my wand tightened. Was it Filch? Or worse, his cat, Mrs. Norris? I pressed myself against the wall, barely breathing as I peeked around the corner. Nothing. Just an empty corridor stretching into the darkness. I exhaled, my breath fogging slightly in the cool air. I was being paranoid. Shaking off the nerves, I continued forward, my wand still glowing faintly. Then, a whisper. Soft. Unintelligible. My blood ran cold. I spun around, wand raised, but the corridor behind me was still empty. The whisper had been right behind me. I swallowed hard, my pulse hammering. Maybe this wasn't a great idea after all. Maybe I should turn back. But before I could make a decision, the glow from my wand suddenly intensified. The blue light pulsed brighter, sending a faint ripple of energy through the air. And then, A door appeared, right in front of me. I stared in shock. It hadn't been there before, I was sure of it. 1 second, it was just a stretch of stone wall. The next, a tall, wooden door stood in its place, its surface carved with ancient runes that shimmered under the moonlight. I hesitated. My instinct screamed at me to turn around, go back to the common room, pretend I never saw this. But some deep, unexplainable pull urged me forward. My one had led me here. There had to be a reason. With a deep breath, I reached out and placed my hand against the cold wood. The moment my fingers touched the surface, a rush of magic surged through me like stepping into icy water. My skin prickled, my hair stood on end. The air around me seemed to hum, vibrating with unseen energy. The door creaked open. Beyond it, darkness. A deep, endless void. The kind of blackness that swallowed everything whole. My heart pounded. Every rational part of my brain told me to run. But my wand was glowing brighter than ever. And then, before I could think, before I could react, the darkness reached out and pulled me inside. The moment the darkness pulled me in, my breath caught in my throat. It wasn't like stepping into a dimly lit room, it was emptiness. A void that swallowed every trace of warmth, sound, and light. For a brief, terrifying moment, I felt like I was floating in nothingness, weightless and adrift. Then, my feet hit solid ground. I gasped, stumbling slightly, my wand still clenched tightly in my fingers. The glow at its tip flickered uncertainly, the blue light struggling against the thick, oppressive blackness surrounding me. Where was I? I turned in a slow circle, trying to make sense of my surroundings. Shapes loomed in the distance, tall, twisted silhouettes that shifted as if they were watching me. The air was thick with something strange, something ancient, and I could feel the hum of unseen magic pressing against my skin. Hogwarts wasn't supposed to have places like this, was it? I took a tentative step forward, the sound of my footfall swallowed almost immediately by the eerie silence. My heartbeat was the only thing I could hear, fast and uneasy. Then, a whisper. Not behind me this time. Right in front of me. I froze. The whisper wasn't in any language I recognized, but it sent a chill straight through my bones. It was soft, like a breath against my ear, curling around me in an unsettling, almost curious way. I swallowed hard, gripping my wand tighter. Hello? No response. The whispering continued, swirling in and out of my hearing like waves against a shore. I took another step forward, my wand trembling in my grasp. And then, a figure emerged from the shadows. I barely held in a gasp. It wasn't human. At least, I didn't think it was. The figure was tall and cloaked, its body blurring at the edges as if it wasn't entirely solid. The fabric of its robes rippled, shifting like liquid smoke, and where its face should have been, nothing. Just emptiness. A void, darker than the surrounding shadows. The whispers grew louder. The figure tilted its head, as if studying me. I took an involuntary step back, my pulse hammering. What are you? The figure didn't answer. It simply raised a hand, or something like a hand, toward me. I flinched, my instincts screaming at me to run. But something about the movement wasn't threatening. It felt almost expectant, like it was waiting for something. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to stay still. "Did you bring me here?" No response. The air around us pulsed, charged with unseen energy. My wand flickered again, the blue light shimmering in. Suddenly, the figure moved, not in a way that I could track with my eyes. One moment, it was a few feet away. The next, right in front of me. I sucked in a breath, my entire body tensing. But the figure didn't attack. It merely lowered its hand toward my wand. The moment it touched the wood, a surge of magic erupted between us. I cried out, my wand igniting with light, the blue glow flashing into something blinding. Energy rushed through my veins, burning and electric, and for a moment, I understood. This place, this magic, it wasn't trying to hurt me. It was trying to test me. The realization struck me like lightning. This wasn't some random accident. My one had led me here. And this presence, whatever it was, had been waiting, watching, testing me. My chest heaved as the light from my wand intensified, pushing against the surrounding darkness. The figure tilted its head again, and for the first time, I thought I saw something. Eyes, faint, glimmering like distant stars in the void. And then, everything shattered. The darkness crumbled around me, dissolving like ink in water. The figure vanished, the whispers fading into silence. I felt a sudden, sharp pull, and before I could react, I was falling. Down, down, down. And then I hit the floor of the Hogwarts corridor. I gasped, my hand slamming against the cold stone. My wand clattered beside me, its glow dimming to a faint shimmer. My heart pounded wildly as I struggled to catch my breath. The door was gone. No trace of it remained. Just the same old stretch of empty castle wall. Had it even been real? I sat there for a moment, my head spinning. My magic still tingled beneath my skin, buzzing like a current that had been disturbed. My wand, silent all day, now felt different in my hand. It wasn't resisting me anymore. It felt like it had finally accepted me. I let out a shaky breath. Whatever had just happened, it was only the beginning. Underscore 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 underscore. I sat on the cold stone floor, my breath still uneven, my mind racing to make sense of what had just happened. The corridor was empty, as if the mysterious door and the shadowy figure had never existed. But I knew better. I felt it. Something inside me had changed. I looked down at my wand, the wood still warm against my palm. It no longer felt foreign, no longer like an object resisting my magic. Instead, it felt familiar. Right. As if it had finally accepted me. I let out a long breath and forced myself to stand, my legs still shaky. My brain screamed that I should run back to the dormitory before Filch or a prefect found me, but my heart was still caught up in the whirlwind of everything that had just transpired. What was that place? Who or what was that figure? And why had my wand led me there? The more I tried to piece things together, the more questions I had. But one thing was certain, this had not been some random accident. My magic, unstable as it was, had been calling out for something. And now it felt balanced, grounded, like I had passed some sort of test. I turned toward the corridor that led back to the Gryffindor common room, my fingers still tight around my wand. My footsteps were slow at first, hesitant, but with each step, I felt lighter. A quiet confidence settled inside me. For the first time since arriving at Hogwarts, I didn't feel like a mistake. I didn't feel like my magic was some untamed storm, ready to wreak havoc at the slightest provocation. I felt like a wizard. As I climbed the stairs, the castle seemed warmer, more familiar. The walls no longer loomed over me, and the flickering candlelight felt welcoming rather than eerie. Hogwarts had always been a place of magic, but now it felt like home. By the time I reached the common room entrance, exhaustion was starting to catch up with me. The portrait of the fat lady eyed me suspiciously as I approached. "Out for a midnight stroll, were you?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. I hesitated. Something like that," she huffed. "First years. Always sneaking about like they think they're invisible." "Password?" "Fortuna Major," I muttered. The portrait swung open, and I stepped inside, relief washing over me at the sight of the cozy, dimly lit room. The fire in the hearth was burning low, casting gentle shadows against the walls. The furniture looked extra inviting, but I knew I needed to get back to bed. I made my way toward the dormitory staircase when a voice. "You look like you just saw a ghost." I turned to see Felix lounging on one of the armchairs, his arms crossed, a knowing smirk on his face. His curly hair was sticking up on one side, as if he had just woken up. I hesitated. How could I even begin to explain what had just happened? "It's a long story." Felix tilted his head, studying me for a moment. Then, instead of pressing further, he simply grinned. "Well, whatever it was, you look different." I blinked. "Different?" "Yeah," he said, stretching lazily before standing up. "I dunno. More yourself." I didn't know how to respond to that. Maybe because he was right. Felix yawned and clapped a hand on my shoulder as he passed. "Get some sleep, mystery boy. We've got classes in the morning." I nodded, watching as he disappeared up the stairs. I turned to look at the fire, watching the embers glow softly in the dim room. My fingers tightened around my wand one last time before I finally let out a breath and made my way to bed. As I slid under the covers, the warmth of my blankets wrapped around me like a comforting spell. I closed my eyes, the events of the night still buzzing in my mind. I had stepped into something unknown. I had faced the darkness. And yet, I had come out stronger. This was just my first day at Hogwarts. And I had a feeling this was only the beginning. And so, the first day at Hogwarts comes to an end. A day filled with wonder, mystery, and a touch of the unknown. Magic is not always predictable. Sometimes it challenges us, pushes us beyond our limits, and guides us toward discoveries we never imagined. But in the end, it always brings us closer to who we truly are. As the castle settles into the quiet of the night, the torches flicker low, and the stars shine gently above the enchanted halls. The adventure has only just begun. Now, close your eyes. Let the warmth of this world stay with you, like a whisper of magic lingering in the air. Rest, dream, and when the morning comes, who knows what new wonders await. Good night.